The chamber's air was heavy with formality, yet the lone figure at its center stood without bow or salute. His skin was the mottled gray of a world long forgotten, his scales faded, his left arm replaced with an uneven mechanical prosthetic. Every scar spoke of battles the council had only read about in archived reports. He was not there to impress them, he was there to warn them. They had summoned him as a formality, a relic of wars past, to offer insight into the newly discovered world designated Terra 3. The Empire's scientists had labeled it primitive, home to a species barely unified under one planetary government, lacking warp capability, and still reliant on chemical-based projectile weapons. The Council's first mistake was assuming such a species posed no threat. Their second was assuming the veteran's words would confirm their confidence. He began without ceremony. His voice was low, rasped by age, yet carried the weight of hard memory. You believe you've found an easy conquest. You think your fleets will descend, your troops will march, and their leaders will kneel before you. That will not happen. If you proceed, you will bleed, more than you have ever bled. Some of the council exchanged amused glances. One leaned forward, lips curling. They have no starships, no planetary shields, no interstellar allies. Why speak as if they are a danger? The veteran's eye narrowed. Because I have seen them fight. He told them of a border conflict decades earlier, an unremarkable skirmish over a mining world the Empire had claimed. The humans had no stake in that system, yet they arrived as mercenaries for a minor trade league. Small in number, wearing mismatched armor, armed with scavenged rifles. They should have been crushed in hours. Instead, they fought with a precision and ferocity he had never witnessed. They did not attack head-on. They vanished into terrain, striking where defenses were weakest. They learned patterns faster than any foe he had faced, turning enemy tactics against them within days. They do not fight for orders alone, he said, his voice tightening. They fight for one another. For reasons you cannot erase by destroying a flag or a leader. They fight as though every battle is the last they will ever see, and they intend to make it yours as well. The youngest counselor laughed outright. You were bested by primitives. That is what this is about. His prosthetic fingers flexed, metal creaking. I watched them fight with broken weapons, using rocks, blades, anything they could find. I saw one crawl forward with both legs gone, carrying explosives toward our barricade. He detonated himself to buy his unit a chance to advance. Do you understand what kind of mind does that? Not one that fears you. Not one that breaks easily. They asked how such determination could matter against orbital bombardment. He answered without hesitation. Because they will survive it. They will scatter into shadows, into ruins, into tunnels beneath the earth. And when you believe them gone, they will be watching, waiting, learning every weakness in your armor. You will never sleep without fear. A silence spread, but it was not agreement, it was the stillness of dismissal. The head of the council leaned back, talons tapping against the armrest. The Empire's fleets have subdued worlds far greater in number and capability. We will not delay action over war stories. The veteran's jaw tightened. Stories end. Warnings echo. He stepped closer to the council's dais, gaze sweeping over them. You think of war as numbers, as fleets and formations. They do not. They will make war personal. They will make it inside your mind. You will not see an army approaching, you will see your captains vanish, your ships destroyed by your own weapons, your soldiers refusing to leave their barracks. And you will not know when it began. One counselor scoffed. They are not like us. They are undeveloped. They will kneel. The veteran's voice dropped to a whisper, forcing them to lean forward to hear. That is the last mistake every enemy they have faced has made. He turned, not waiting to be dismissed. His steps were slow but steady, the metallic footfall of his prosthetic echoing through the chamber. At the threshold, he paused without looking back. You called me here because you thought I would give you a plan for victory. I cannot. I can only give you the truth. If you march on them, you will not return whole. And if you survive, you will wish you had not. No one stopped him as the doors closed behind him. Laughter rose from a few, polite murmurs from others, but not one took his warning to heart. In their arrogance, they saw only an old soldier haunted by the ghosts of a small war. They could not know those ghosts were already sharpening their blades for what was to come. The Imperial High Command wasted no time. The moment the Council concluded its session, orders were transmitted to the conquest fleets. Terra 3 was marked for immediate subjugation, classified as a low-priority operation requiring minimal resources. A single expeditionary force, supported by 2 cruisers and a network of orbital drones, was deemed more than sufficient to overwhelm the planet's defenses. Imperial intelligence had concluded that its inhabitants lacked the infrastructure or weaponry to mount anything beyond scattered resistance. The official plan was methodical in theory: enter orbit, disable major communication hubs, deploy ground units to secure government centers, and establish a permanent garrison before the population could organize. It was the same template that had brought dozens of worlds into submission over the past century. By all measurable criteria, it was flawless. The flaw was that Terra 3 was unlike any world the Empire had conquered. When the first landing forces touched down, they found no organized planetary defense to oppose them. Cities were eerily quiet, and roads leading into urban zones were deserted. The humans had not stood in neat formation to challenge the invaders. They had simply vanished from the open. To the Imperial officers, this was confirmation of weakness. In truth, it was their first mistake. Troops began moving through empty streets, establishing control posts, and mapping the infrastructure for resource extraction. The absence of conflict created an illusion of progress. But that illusion cracked within hours. A patrol sent to secure a power relay failed to return. A supply convoy reported interference in its navigation system, only to disappear from sensors moments later. Drone footage recovered from one such incident showed a sudden explosion ripping through the lead vehicle, followed by figures emerging from the smoke, fast, precise, and gone again before reinforcements could respond. Imperial strategists dismissed the events as isolated. They reasoned that a handful of locals had resisted using crude explosives. Yet patterns began emerging. The strikes were never random. They targeted key components of the occupation: fuel depots, comm relays, and command uplinks. Each attack forced delays, and each delay bred unease among the troops. Efforts to locate the attackers yielded nothing. Search teams swept suspected zones only to find abandoned positions and decoys designed to waste their time. On more than one occasion, an Imperial squad would follow fresh tracks into a derelict building, only to discover the structure rigged to collapse the moment they entered. Casualties mounted without a single decisive battle. Then came the disruptions to communication. Entire sectors reported sudden interference in encrypted channels. Alien voices were replaced with mocking transmissions, taunts delivered in multiple languages, some of them clearly the invaders' own dialects spoken with unsettling accuracy. Other times, the voices were urgent Imperial commands, instructing units to redeploy, orders later revealed as fabrications designed to pull soldiers into ambush zones. An incident in the northern sector marked a shift from irritation to alarm. A fortified forward base, equipped with automated turrets and shielded perimeter walls, ceased transmitting status reports. A recon drone sent to investigate captured the aftermath: defensive systems disabled, guard posts abandoned, and scorch marks indicating precision strikes from the base's own weaponry. Hours later, intercepted chatter revealed that a small human team had breached the command module, hacked into its systems, and turned its firepower inward before disappearing. The Empire's assumption that these were disorganized pockets of resistance began to erode, but not enough to alter strategy. Commanders argued the human success was the result of luck and limited knowledge of alien systems. What they refused to acknowledge was the speed with which those systems were being understood and repurposed. Reports from the field painted a clearer picture. These humans did not attack in mass formations. They moved in small, highly coordinated groups. They struck quickly, withdrew before reinforcements arrived, and never used the same method twice. In one sector, they disabled an entire armored column using nothing but stolen explosives. In another, they intercepted a shipment of plasma rifles and returned days later to use them against their original owners. What unsettled the troops most was the sense that they were being studied. Every failed Imperial maneuver was followed by an attack exploiting the exact flaw revealed in that operation. It was as if the enemy was learning their doctrine faster than they could deploy it. Soldiers began speaking in hushed tones of shadows that followed them, of eyes watching from ruined structures, of unseen hands always a step ahead. By the end of the first cycle, official casualty reports had risen beyond projections for a month-long engagement. The senior officers downplayed the numbers in communications to the council, insisting that final victory was imminent. But among the ranks, doubt had begun to seep in. They had arrived expecting to crush a primitive world in days. Instead, they were fighting an enemy they could not find, could not predict, and increasingly, could not understand. The first signs of organized defiance emerged without warning. Across multiple continents, attacks erupted within the same hour, striking targets hundreds of kilometers apart with uncanny coordination. Imperial commanders assumed these were coincidences, but analysis of the timing revealed the truth. Someone was orchestrating a global counteroffensive. Human resistance cells, once scattered and isolated, were now operating as a unified force. The change was immediate and devastating. In the Western Hemisphere, armored convoys found themselves funneled into narrow urban corridors where towering structures blocked aerial support. In the East, a fuel processing facility vital to the occupation went up in a chain of explosions that crippled vehicle deployment for an entire sector. Coastal garrisons reported sudden breaches from both land and sea, as if the enemy had mastered striking from multiple environments simultaneously. Every encounter revealed tactics that had evolved since the first engagements. Where once the resistance relied on surprise alone, they now combined deception with precision timing. Entire Imperial battalions were drawn into seemingly abandoned zones only to be cut off by detonations that sealed escape routes. Others were lured into dense forest under the cover of false orders, their equipment rendered useless by electromagnetic interference moments before the attack began. The adaptability was relentless. Weapons captured from earlier raids were no longer used as found. They were altered, improved, and redeployed in ways the Empire had not anticipated. Plasma rifles were modified for extended range and integrated with human optics. Drone swarms were hijacked mid-flight and turned against their owners, using altered transponders to bypass Imperial defense protocols. Even damaged vehicles were refitted with improvised armor, their systems hybridized with alien components to gain speed or firepower. Attempts to overwhelm them with sheer numbers failed repeatedly. Whenever the Empire concentrated its forces, the resistance simply dissolved into terrain, disappearing into mountains, deserts, and underground tunnel networks, only to reappear days later in a completely different region. In urban environments, the humans transformed every structure into a weapon. Stairwells became kill zones, rooftops sniper perches, and sewer systems hid in highways. Reports to the High Command began to take on an uneasy tone. Field officers noted that the enemy seemed to know Imperial movement patterns before they occurred. Convoys were intercepted at the most vulnerable points in their routes. Supply drops were stolen minutes after landing, suggesting an intimate knowledge of fleet logistics. No matter how carefully operations were planned, the resistance always appeared to be one step ahead. Morale among the occupiers faltered. The veterans among them recognized the chilling reality: this was no longer a defensive struggle. The humans were no longer reacting, they were dictating the tempo of the war. Units that had once held fortified positions were abandoning them for fear of encirclement. Entire sectors became ghost zones, seated without a fight because the risk of holding them outweighed any strategic value. One particularly demoralizing blow came when a planetary command ship stationed in orbit was destroyed without a single hostile craft breaching the defensive perimeter. Investigation revealed the strike had originated from the planet's surface, using a hybrid launcher cobbled together from mining equipment, salvaged ship parts, and alien missile components. The precision was perfect, the result catastrophic. Command was forced to reroute fleet assets from other campaigns to reinforce the failing occupation. Whispers of the veteran's warning began to circulate among the troops. Some claimed to have heard his exact words repeated in intercepted transmissions, as if the humans were deliberately using his prophecy to erode confidence. For many, the thought that their enemy understood their fears was worse than the fighting itself. By the close of the third cycle, the Empire had lost more equipment to capture and sabotage than to outright destruction. Analysts admitted, in private channels, that the humans' learning curve defied all known models of warfare. What began as an invasion against an allegedly inferior species had transformed into a campaign of survival for the invaders. The strategic initiative was no longer in Imperial hands, and the realization was beginning to spread far beyond the battlefield. Reinforcements arrived expecting to stabilize the campaign, but they stepped into a theater already slipping beyond control. The new fleets entered orbit to find key staging areas gone, orbital relays silent, and surface forces scattered in isolated pockets. Attempts to re-establish command links met with immediate interference. Communication relays failed within hours of being brought online, sometimes destroyed outright, other times sending back corrupted data that could not be trusted. On the ground, reinforcements quickly discovered that the front lines no longer existed. Humans had abandoned conventional battlefields entirely. Instead, they operated as hunters, striking with precision against officers, engineers, and supply officers rather than confronting mass troops. It was a deliberate dismantling of the Empire's ability to function, cutting away at the structure instead of battering the walls. The loss of orbital superiority began with subtle incursions. Docked shuttles vanished from hangars without alarms. Small explosions crippled maneuvering thrusters on ships stationed above population centers, forcing them to withdraw for repairs. Then came the decisive breaches. Human teams infiltrated low-orbit stations, bypassing security protocols as if they had trained on them for years. Within days, captured control systems were turning the Empire's own defense satellites into hostile weapons, firing on their fleets and installations without warning. Psychological impact spread faster than the physical damage. Prisoners who were allowed to return brought stories that seemed unbelievable, being spared only so they could carry tales of what they had witnessed. They spoke of captors who vanished into smoke after delivering messages, of traps laid with surgical precision, of environments where every step felt like it could trigger death. Such accounts reached not only the soldiers but their families and allies far from the war front, planting seeds of doubt that no official communique could erase. Desertion became a growing concern. Lower-ranked soldiers began slipping away during night cycles, abandoning their posts to blend into civilian populations or flee into uncontrolled zones. Patrol units sent to recover them rarely returned. Among those who stayed, there was a noticeable shift. Movements became slower, caution replaced confidence, and orders were questioned more openly. Amid this unraveling, the old veteran was brought once more before the high command. No words were exchanged at first. He stood in silence as reports were read aloud: losses of ships, officers missing in action, sectors abandoned. The commanders avoided meeting his gaze, but the weight of his earlier warning hung over every breath in the chamber. On the surface, human strikes began to shift from defense to outright pursuit. Imperial units on retreat found themselves chased into kill zones, harried for days with no chance to regroup. The humans showed no intention of holding territory in the conventional sense. Instead, they let the invaders feel that nowhere was safe. Even zones declared secure for weeks could be plunged into chaos overnight, as if the land itself had turned against them. Sabotage operations reached a level that made traditional reinforcement impossible. Supply depots were destroyed just before distribution. Power grids collapsed without visible cause, grounding aerial support. In some cases, entire fleets were left stranded in low orbit when refueling ships failed to arrive, later found drifting and gutted for parts. The message from the resistance grew unmistakable. This was no longer a defense of their home. It was a deliberate hunt. Broadcasts intercepted across all channels carried a single sentiment, voiced in countless tongues. You came to conquer. Now you will learn what it means to be prey. Even the most loyal Imperial officers began urging a reassessment of the campaign. But the pride of the Council, the refusal to admit a miscalculation, kept the official stance unchanged. Orders to push forward continued, even as available forces dwindled and logistics broke under the strain. The veteran's silence in the council chamber said more than words could. He knew they would not turn back until forced. And from the reports pouring in from the surface, it was clear that the humans intended to deliver that force in a way no one in the Empire would ever forget. The final phase began without any declaration. In a single planetary cycle, the Resistance launched synchronized assaults on every remaining stronghold and fleet asset still clinging to operational status. Command hubs that had withstood weeks of harassment fell within hours. Fuel reserves detonated in cascading firestorms, blackening the skies above once secure zones. Orbital ships received falsified docking clearances that lured them into prepositioned kill arcs, where captured defense arrays shredded their hulls before they could react. The Empire's lines fractured completely. Units tried to regroup, only to find retreat corridors blocked and supply caches already destroyed. Coordinated fire from multiple resistance cells forced Imperial forces into fragmented withdrawals, each step hounded by sniper fire, explosives, and relentless pursuit. No attempt was made to negotiate surrender terms in the field. Those who dropped their weapons were either disarmed and released to spread the tale, or simply vanished into the chaos without explanation. Above the planet, the last intact capital ship became the centerpiece of the Empire's dwindling command. It orbited high, guarded by the remains of the fleet, broadcasting orders for evacuation. Hours later, a captured Imperial warship rose from the surface, moving as though it sought to defect. The defenders hesitated just long enough for it to breach their perimeter. Moments before impact, Resistance broadcasts cut across every channel, carrying the voice of a human commander, wounded, hoarse, but defiant. "You came uninvited. You leave in ruin." The collision tore through the capital ship's core, igniting a chain reaction that consumed it entirely. Panic spread through the surviving vessels. With their central command obliterated, captains acted independently, most choosing immediate withdrawal over further engagement. In the scramble to escape, ships collided, engines failed under strain, and automated defense systems, still under human control, fired on any vessel attempting to break orbit. The exodus turned into a rout. On the surface, Resistance units ceased pursuit once it was clear the invaders were gone. There was no public celebration, no parade, no visible display of triumph. The silence was deliberate. The absence of a victory spectacle ensured that the Empire's final memory of the campaign would be fear and uncertainty, not closure. Within days, the scale of the defeat reached every corner of the galaxy. Worlds long under Imperial control began open revolts, emboldened by the knowledge that an unspacefaring species had dismantled a modern military campaign. Resistance movements invoked the name of Earth in their recruitment messages, framing it not just as a planet but as a symbol that defiance could break even the most entrenched power. Back in the council chamber, the surviving high command sat in grim silence as the veteran entered once more. His presence required no introduction. He looked over the assembly, his expression unreadable, then spoke in a voice steady and final. "I warned you. You laughed. Now every system you touch will remember your defeat here, and they will measure themselves by the day you failed." No one argued. They could not. The logistical losses alone would take decades to recover from, but the greater wound was psychological. Every future campaign would be haunted by the precedent that the humans had set, that an enemy could be everywhere at once, invisible until the decisive strike, and relentless beyond reason. In the years that followed, Imperial scouts avoided charting paths near Terra 3. Even automated probes were withdrawn when Resistance signals echoed through their receivers, as though the planet itself was watching. In nursery stories told across distant colonies, human warriors became the monsters in the dark, creatures that could not be bargained with, only survived. On Earth, there was no rest. Reconstruction began quietly, but so did preparation. Factories that once built civilian goods shifted to producing engines and hulls capable of piercing the void. Plans for orbital shipyards were drafted in secrecy. Humanity's leaders understood that the Empire's retreat was not the end of danger, only the beginning of a wider game. And so the lesson endured. The Empire remembered the sting of its failure, and the galaxy whispered of the day a backwater world proved that the mightiest fleets could be broken, not with superior weapons, but with an unbreakable will and the patience to strike when the enemy believed the fight was already won.